The moment Ethan Miller realized his family had already left him behind came before the front door even closed. The house was loud with excitement. It's the kind that fills rooms when people are about to leave for somewhere beautiful. Suitcases rolled. Across hardwood floors, airline tickets were stacked on the kitchen counter. Someone had left a printed photo of a Hawaiian beach near the fridge. The ocean bright and unreal. It's like a promise that wasn't meant for everyone. Ethan stood near the hallway, holding his phone, watching his father laugh. Robert Miller looked younger when he was happy. He joked loudly, moving fast, acting like life was light. Beside him, Ethan's stepmother checked her bag for the third time, already dressed like she belonged on a resort brochure. And between them was Sophie, their daughter, together, scrolling through her phone, smiling at something Ethan would never see. They were leaving in less than an hour. Ethan hadn't been invited. "Did you set the thermostat?" Linda asked. "Not." Looking at him? "Yes," Ethan replied calmly. Robert tossed his car keys in the air and caught them. "Good. Someone needs to stay behind and keep the place standing." Sophie laughed. "Someone's got to watch the house. Freeloaders need jobs too." The word hung in the air, sharp and careless. Ethan felt it hit his chest, but his face didn't change. He had learned that reacting only made things worse. Silence was easier. Silence hurt less than hoping someone would take it back. Linda smiled tightly. "She's joking," she said, but there was no warmth in her voice. "You know how Sophie is?" Sophie didn't apologize. Ethan nodded once. "Have a good trip." Robert clapped him on the shoulder like he was a neighbor, not a son. "Don't stay up all night. Let's try to look for better work when we're gone. Better work." Ethan worked nights at a warehouse and mornings on his laptop, designing apps and fixing small tech problems for clients he'd never meet. He paid rent. He covered his share of utilities. But in this house, none of that mattered. He was still the reminder of a past marriage, a woman who died too young. A child who didn't fit the new picture. The front door slammed shut. Minutes later, the house went quiet. Ethan stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the empty space where his family had been. He picked up one of the beach brochures Sophie had left behind. A smiling couple walked along white sand, their feet in clear water. Everything about the photo calm and perfect. He folded the brochure and set it down. That night the basement felt colder than usual. Ethan lay on his narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant hum of the refrigerator upstairs. His phone buzzed. A message from Sophie. A photo popped up. First-class seats. Champagne glasses raised. Sophie. "Wish you were here." "Just kidding." Ethan turned his phone face down. Earlier that same day, while the rest of the house buzzed with vacation plans, Ethan had received an email that still felt unreal. He remembered the subject line clearly. "Offer of employment, Harrison and Cole." At first he thought it was spam. Harrison and Cole was a respected private investment firm based in Seattle. They didn't reach out to people like him, or so he believed. But the email was real. They had discovered a small financial tracking app Ethan had built 2 years earlier during long nights after his mother passed away. He had never marketed it. He barely talked about it. It had been something to keep his mind busy when grief made sleep impossible. Someone had noticed. The offer was clear. A full-time position, 6 figures, benefits, a real future. Ethan read the email again and again that night, heart racing, hands shaking. He wanted to tell someone. He wanted to hear someone say they were proud. But there was no one in that house who would believe him. The next morning, Ethan woke early and went to work. He moved fast, kept his head down, finished his shift without complaint. Afterward, he stopped by a small cafe near the warehouse, ordered black coffee, and opened his laptop. He replied to the email yes. The response came within minutes. They wanted him to start in 3 weeks. 3 weeks to disappear from a life that had never made space for him. That evening, Ethan returned to the empty house. He cooked simple food, ate alone, and washed his plate. The silence felt different now, less heavy, almost hopeful. Over the next few days, he planned quietly. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He just prepared. He found a small apartment listing in Seattle. He sold his old car and bought a used one better suited for the drive. He packed boxes slowly, carefully, like he was handling something fragile. On the 5th day, while folding clothes into a suitcase, Ethan paused. He looked around the basement room that had been his for years. The low ceiling, the cracked mirror, the single window that barely let in light. He pulled out a framed photo. From a drawer, it was of him and his mother. She was smiling, her arm around his shoulders, her eyes warm and tired. She had always believed in him. Even when money was tight, even when life felt unfair. "I tried," Ethan whispered to the empty room. That night, he sat at the kitchen table and wrote a letter. Not angry, not dramatic, just honest. He wrote about how he had worked hard, how being called a freeloader hurt more than they knew, how he wanted a relationship with his father but didn't know how to keep begging for respect. He thanked Robert for the roof, even though it had never felt like home. He folded the letter neatly and placed it on the counter. 2 days later, Ethan stood by the front door with his suitcase. The house smelled clean, untouched, like nothing had changed. He took one last look around. No one was there to stop him. He locked the door and left. The drive north was long, quiet, and strangely calming. The road stretched ahead, endless and open. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel trapped. He felt free. He didn't know what waited for him in Seattle. He didn't know who he would become. But he knew one thing with certainty. He would never beg to belong again, and far away. On a sunny beach, his family laughed for photos, unaware that the person they mocked had already stepped into a life they would never be part of. Not yet, because the moment they realized what they had lost was coming, and it would change everything. Seattle rain hit the windshield like tiny drums, steady and relentless. As Ethan drove through unfamiliar streets, leaving his old life behind, he hadn't looked back once. Every mile felt like a small victory. The city was gray and wet, but it was also alive, full of possibilities. For the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. He felt ready. Ethan moved into a small apartment near Lake Union. It wasn't glamorous, but it had a view of the water, a tiny balcony, and enough space for him to breathe. Unpacking his few boxes, he felt the strange thrill of ownership. Number 1 would mock him here. No one would call him a freeloader. This was his. Every item placed carefully on the shelf, every book stacked neatly, was a silent declaration. He existed. He belonged somewhere now. The next morning, Ethan walked into Harrison and Cole for the first time. The lobby was polished, filled with people in crisp suits and polite smiles. He felt small for a moment, but he straightened his shoulders. Interview process had been tough. The competition was fierce. Yet here he was, hired not because he had luck, but because of talent, persistence, and resilience. His heart thumped with anticipation. Claire Thompson was at the front desk when he arrived. She looked up from her laptop and gave him a warm, steady smile. Ethan noticed immediately she had eyes that seemed to see more than just the surface. "You must be Ethan," she said. "We're glad to have you." Her voice was calm, confident, inviting. He nodded shyly, fumbling with his bag. Days passed quickly. Ethan learned the rhythm of the office. He listened more than he spoke, observing patterns, noting how projects moved, and quietly contributing where he could. But people noticed him, not for loud announcements or flashy displays, but for his work ethic, for the steady, honest dedication he carried into every task. One rainy afternoon, while Ethan was finishing up a report late, Claire appeared at his office doorway. "Hey," she said gently, "need a ride home?" Ethan blinked. No one had ever offered him that before. Not his father. Not anyone in that house he grew up in. "Sure," he said, surprised. During the drive, they talked not about work. Not about surface level things, but about life, dreams, and the little failures that build people. Ethan found himself talking about his past, about the emptiness he had felt about being dismissed as a freeloader. Claire didn't judge, she just listened. And that simple act listening felt revolutionary. Over the following weeks, their friendship grew. Coffee breaks became shared moments. Walks through rainy Seattle streets turned into long conversations. Ethan realized he was laughing more than he had in years. The pain of being ignored didn't vanish, but it softened. He didn't have to explain every detail. Claire simply understood. She didn't fix him, but she reminded him he wasn't alone. Meanwhile, back in Oregon, the vacation ended abruptly. Robert had taken out extra money for the trip, counting on Ethan's contributions to cover bills while they were gone. But the account was empty. Panic spread through the family as they realized their finances were tied to someone they had mocked. Linda's face went pale. He did what? She whispered, her tone shaky. Sophie, scrolling through social media, froze. One by one, the pictures of happy smiles on the beach were replaced by a shock neither mother nor daughter could shake. And then they found the letter. Robert held it in his hands. Reading each word slowly, disbelief on his face. Ethan hadn't begged, he hadn't demanded anything. He had simply explained how he felt invisible, how he had tried to contribute, how calling him a freeloader had cut deeper than they knew. The calm, honest tone left no room for misinterpretation. Robert tried calling him. The phone went straight to voicemail. Panic shifted to regret. Sophie stared at the screen, realizing her teasing had been cruel. They had underestimated the person they mocked for years. Meanwhile, Ethan settled into his new life. Harrison and Cole announced a major internal project led by him. His name appeared in emails, on internal boards, and finally, on a company press release, he had arrived. Sophie saw it first, scrolling through her feed, stopping at the headline. Ethan Miller to lead innovative financial initiative at Harrison and Cole. The word freeloader now felt bitter. She swallowed, realizing she had never really seen him, not the person he had become. And he wasn't just successful. He was confident, respected, and moving toward a future he had built himself. Ethan didn't look for revenge. He didn't post about them, simply moved forward. Claire became more than a friend. Her presence was gentle, quiet, comforting. She respected his space, and yet with each conversation, each touch of understanding, she drew him closer to something he hadn't known he could feel again. Trust, affection, the possibility of love. One evening, standing on a quiet dock with the city lights reflecting on the water, Ethan felt the weight of the past lift slightly. Claire stood beside him, shoulder brushing against his. "I'm glad you didn't stay where you weren't wanted," she said softly. Ethan smiled, a deep, peaceful smile. "I didn't just leave," he said. "I arrived." Months passed. He thrived in his work, built friendships, and began imagining a future that didn't include the pain of being dismissed. Back in Oregon, Robert and Linda tried to reach him again, but Ethan's focus had shifted. He had learned that respect is earned, not given freely. Ethan understood now that families can teach you who you are, but some families also teach you who you must become. Claire's hand brushed against his again, and Ethan realized he was ready for this chapter of life, steady, independent, and quietly powerful. No more freeloader jokes. No more silent hurt. Only growth, love, and the quiet triumph of finally being seen and far away. The memories of Hawaii faded, replaced by a life that belonged entirely to him. Life filled with respect, affection, and the kind of love that didn't mock, but built, encouraged, and celebrated him. Ethan had finally arrived.